You probably think your internet is wireless. It isn't. Right now, there's a good chance your data is traveling through glass cables lying on the bottom of the ocean. Most people imagine the internet as something floating somewhere in the cloud, wireless, invisible, almost magical. The reality couldn't be more different. Nearly every international message, video call, financial transaction, and AI request travels through physical cables lying on the ocean floor. More than 95% of international internet traffic moves this way. Not through satellites. Not through the air. Through cables. Submarine cables stretched across thousands of kilometers of ocean. And almost nobody knows they exist. In 2022, an underwater volcano erupted near Tonga. One eruption. Tonga went dark. Completely cut off from the internet. For weeks. Not because the system failed. Because a cable literally snapped. Now the question becomes obvious: why would we trust so much of modern life to thin glass fibers on the ocean floor? Because engineers weren't solving for perfection. They were solving for scale. Because the alternatives are worse. Satellites have limited capacity. They can't move enough data. They have high latency. They're expensive to launch and maintain. Undersea cables can carry terabits of data per second. They're faster. They're cheaper to operate. They're the only infrastructure that can actually scale to what the modern world needs. So engineers made a choice. They accepted the risk. They built a network where much of the world's traffic passes through a surprisingly small number of critical routes. And in doing so, they created a network whose greatest strength is also its greatest vulnerability. Now that vulnerability has a name. And it happens more often than you'd think. Ship anchors. Fishing trawlers. Undersea earthquakes. These aren't theoretical risks. They happen constantly. In fact, there are approximately 200 submarine cable faults every year globally. 200 actual breaks. Not 200 attempts. 200 failures. Fishing trawlers account for about 40 to 50% of these incidents. Ship anchors account for another 30 to 40%. The rest come from natural events like earthquakes and underwater landslides. In late 2024, a cargo ship in the Baltic Sea dragged its anchor along the seabed for over 100 miles. Two major fiber-optic cables cut simultaneously. Digital communication between Finland and Germany disrupted. Data had to reroute. Latency spiked. Most people never noticed. That's the hidden strength of the internet. The network bends before it breaks, but only because engineers built redundancy into it. Just months before that, in the Red Sea, a vessel damaged by conflict drifted for weeks, dragging its anchor across the seabed. 3 separate cables severed. Traffic rerouted again. Asia to Europe connectivity disrupted, but not destroyed. Businesses felt it immediately. Financial institutions that routed traffic through those cables suddenly experienced latency spikes. Cloud services slowed. Tech companies had to reroute traffic dynamically in real time. Most people never noticed. Because the system has redundancy built in. Most of the time. But the incident revealed something important: how dependent we are on cables we've never heard of. The cables themselves are remarkably sophisticated. Each one is about the thickness of a garden hose, but inside, fiber-optic glass strands thinner than a human hair transmit data as pulses of light. Those light pulses travel at nearly the speed of light across thousands of kilometers. It's remarkable engineering. But it comes with a cost. The same fragility that makes them fast also makes them vulnerable. A single cable can carry terabits of data per second. Multiple cables in the same route means multiple points of failure. And if those cables are clustered in narrow geographical corridors, like the Strait of Hormuz or the Red Sea, then one incident doesn't just affect one cable. It affects an entire region's connectivity. That's why redundancy is built in. That's why data reroutes automatically. But redundancy only works if there are truly alternate routes available. And in many parts of the world, there aren't. Consider the Strait of Hormuz. A crucial choke point where fiber-optic cables carrying data between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe are concentrated. An estimated 2,500 vessels crowd through that strait every year. Of those, roughly 250 operate without proper tracking systems. Spoofing, signal jamming, disabled transponders. The more vessels in a confined space, the higher the probability of accidental anchor damage. And in those trenches, the cables are clustered so tightly that they all take the same route through Omani waters. Iranian waters are diplomatically unavailable. So one accident in that corridor. One distracted captain. One dropped anchor. And a significant portion of the world's data would have to find an alternate path. Engineers have known about these risks from the beginning. But after comparing every alternative, this was still the best system humanity could build. So we've made a collective choice. We've decided to trust nearly everything to thin cables. Lying on the bottom of the ocean. Vulnerable to ships. Vulnerable to weather. Vulnerable to circumstances we can't control. Here's what this reveals. We call it the cloud. But clouds disappear. The internet doesn't float above us. It lies beneath us. Quietly carrying nearly everything modern life depends on. Banking transactions. Hospital records. Military communications. AI systems. Streaming video. Government data. Everything. And it's sitting on the ocean floor in cables thinner than a garden hose. Until one day, a single cable breaks. Do you know where your data travels? Tell me in the comments below. It might reveal exactly how fragile the systems you depend on actually are. Subscribe to The Reason It Works for weekly explainers on the hidden systems that shape your life.